Let's start off with the Residential Tenancies Act. I gather there's been some changes. For a lot of the viewers out there, can you explain exactly what the Tenancies Act is, and then maybe what's changed kind of recently?
Well, there's a Tenancies Act in each state. Most of them are called the Residential Tenancies Act, and they regulate the relationship between landlords and tenants. It governs the tenancy agreement naturally, what happens, how do you get out of a tenancy agreement, and all sorts of things. New South Wales has just gone through a revision of that Act. It was a number of years in the making and has been now in place for about 2 months. And so the industry's kind of restabilising around the new Act. Broadly speaking, that each state is different. Naturally, they have different timings and there's difference in the minutiae. New South Wales has just gone through a change that does things like regulate how, when a landlord can terminate a tenancy, generally has increased the time and put a bit more formality into how a tenancy can come to an end, clarified some rules around bonds and disputes between landlords and tenants. But the most important thing the Residential Tenancies Acts do is govern and attempt to regulate the disputes that come out. And of course, when things are going well between landlords and tenants, you don't need the law to govern that. It's really covering what happens when things go bad, which either the tenant's not paying rent or the landlord's not giving quiet enjoyment to the tenant doing the repairs that should be done.
Sure. And so what are some of the major things that have come in with the recent changes?
One of the major impacts is that now landlords have to give 90 days to a tenant when they want to end a fixed-term tenancy, which is an increase. It governs issues around rental bond evictions, the rental arrears process rather, clarifies the right for a landlord or a property manager for that matter to terminate a tenancy when rent's deferred. It also clarifies some issues around rental bonds. There was issues historically around how they were dealt with in terms of rent increases, as well as how the process of how to sell a rented property, the rights of a landlord to enter and take people through the property at different times. And so it's put a lot of that into, as a general principle, like all acts, they're designed, like all tenancy acts, they generally speaking favour, regulate the what I call the bad landlord. And so it protects, it's designed to protect tenants from bad landlords. It doesn't do a lot to protect.
So historically, has that always been the thing? Is the rent is always seen as the poor man on the street that needs protecting, and the landlord's the man with all the money that's...
I've always, to me, reading a Tenancies Act like reading Dickens. Kind of, you go back and it's the landlords are essentially, the tone of them are often, the landlord is someone who's a social, essentially has a rent seeker. Even the name landlord, when there's 1 in 7 Australians are landlords, even the term, we've tried to get away from it. They're just people who are trying to invest in property. And so the Tenancies Act, generally speaking, are focused on protecting the tenant as a general construct. I would favour, or the way we try and think about it is, you're really there to protect either good tenants and good landlords from bad landlords and bad tenants respectively, and that's what the law really should be doing. But in my view, there's a pendulum towards the tenant.
And so, with these changes, is there still more of a push towards the tenant?
It's certainly a lot of the notice periods have been pushed out in favour of the tenant in terms of the notice period.
60 days to
60 to 90 days in terms of terminating a periodic from 30 to 60. It's also put in some more. There's in the detail, but one of the areas to me which is most interesting in the New South Wales law, which now reflects in other states, is that historically in this state, water was charged to the tenant, as electricity is traditionally as well. What we now find is that the regulation is shifting towards environmental issues as well. So properties now have to be metered appropriately, and also the energy efficiency of the water, or the water efficiency, is now measured. And the property manager now has to apportion the bill between the landlord and the tenant based on the efficiency rating. And that's a trend that increasingly going through the country. Queensland has it, New South Wales now has it. Other states, I believe, will see increasingly a much more encroachment of environmental regulation onto the landlord and tenant relationship.